Okay. All right. Thanks everybody for joining. I'm so excited about this webinar. This is probably one that I've been longing for and waiting for since COVID hit. It's a topic that we at Fuel have been thinking a lot about, obviously. That is, how will consumer behaviors change and adapt given what we've been going through with COVID? But I, for one, have been frustrated by the lack of specifics and, frankly, the speculation that surrounds that question. Not that anybody's going to have the exact answer or what's going to happen, and nobody can predict the future. But what I thought would be super helpful, and probably the best person to help us answer some of these questions, is to bring Samantha in, because she's one person who's sitting in front of real customers who are in the real world thinking about their own behaviors and seeing how they have changed over the past few months. And she's the best person to help us answer some of these questions. So I've worked with Samantha on several market research projects over the last 8 years, brought her into TaskRabbit to help us with some brand positioning work, and since have worked with her on some portfolio work, as well as some clients that I used to work with. And she's a master at what she does. She's great at gleaning insights from customers on what matters most for the brands. So I'm so excited to welcome Samantha. Although, where are you, Samantha? There you are. Hi.
I'm not hiding.
I lost you in my screen. So before we kick it off, I just want to tell you a little bit about Samantha. So Samantha Foster Bergeron is an expert qualitative researcher, strategic consultant, and founder and principal of Uncover Research, a qualitative research consultancy specializing in applying consumer insights to inform brand strategy, innovation, product development, and communication programs. Samantha has a long history of developing innovative methods to uncover consumer insights and inform brand strategy and product development. She has a strong insight into leading consumer motivations across segments and life stages, hence the reason we're talking to her today. And she's skilled at applying this insight to help clients innovate and maintain relevance. Under Samantha's leadership, Uncover has successfully partnered with Fortune 500 brands, including Amazon, Starbucks, Facebook, and Levi's, as well as Gap, Target, and Sephora. And she's also helped younger brands, including TaskRabbit, Ollie, and Pax Labs. So Samantha, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we were just chatting. Samantha's up in Tahoe, and she's seeing the real world open up in real time. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But I thought it would be helpful to start by simply getting a sense of the research that you have been conducting since COVID, just to level set and give folks the rationale behind the research, but also some higher level trends and insights that you're seeing.
Sure. So thank you all so much for having me. I'm excited to share what I know with you. And, you know, it is a moving target, and we'll talk about that. But I have, and my firm has been in this very unique situation in that when COVID started, when this all kind of became an issue, we were in the midst of working with a handful of brands that were either positively affected or at least not negatively affected. So we were in field with Target when shelter in place was announced. So we were out there with their digital team working on a bunch of stuff. We were doing a bunch of work with Amazon on some new concepts. We were working with Pax, which is a cannabis vaporizer company, which has done very well during the quarantine. We were working with Welly, which is a young first aid brand. Great time to be selling first aid products. So we had this sort of unique lens where we weren't victims to any of the many, many projects that were canceled. There were thousands upon thousands of focus groups and market research projects that were canceled because of what was going on. We were all systems go. We did, like everybody else in the world, have to pivot and move all of our projects online, which took some doing because a lot of the research we do historically has been in person. But we did it all, I mean, really over the course of one very stressful weekend. We got everything moved online. And since, you know, for a solid 3 months, March, April, and May, I personally talked to between 5 and 20 people a day all over the country. So I would wake up and talk to somebody in Florida who was wearing a MAGA hat and talking about how this is all a conspiracy. Then I would talk to a woman that has 6 kids whose husband is out of work. Then I would talk to a guy who's surfing in Santa Cruz and just started a new brand, and so on and so on and so on. And so, and my team was working as well. So we had this incredible opportunity, which I keep saying, like, I've been in people's living rooms this whole time. I've seen the kids at home. I've seen the elderly parents at home. I've witnessed the stress. And while typically in research, there is this very kind of professional barrier where you set these clear boundaries of, here's what I want to know. Here's what you're sharing with me. This is an agreement that we've made. As with so many other things, COVID took down a lot of those barriers. And we had some very real, very emotional talks with people and really heard what they were going through and what was going on. And suddenly these themes started to arise as we were talking to people. And then a couple of weeks ago, I thought, we're hearing all these themes and I keep sharing all these themes, and I wonder if we shouldn't just pressure test them a little bit. So we did some independent research where, same process. We just jumped on Zoom with a big smattering of people across the country, but talked specifically about COVID and how people are thinking about it and how people are affected and what they're doing differently.
Was that commissioned by a brand, or you're doing that?
That was independent. We commissioned it ourselves. Again, just to kind of pressure test what we're hearing as we're throwing around these huge kind of theories, like, is this true? And then also to give us a little bit more bandwidth to just share things and without worrying about confidentiality and making sure that, we're being kind of above board and ethical. And because we've just gotten into this zone of like talking to people every day, and I still have questions and I still have questions. So up until this week, I've talked to at least, like I said, between 5 and 20 people a day. So lots of thoughts.
Wow. All right, so curious to dig into potentially the research that you commissioned yourself around COVID.
Yeah.
What are the trends you're hearing from respondents as it relates to COVID? What are you seeing most prominently?
I mean, there's so many things. So move me along if I'm talking about something that's not interesting. Jump in with questions, because I could literally sit here all day. Some of the big themes are, one, there are dramatically different reactions to COVID. There are different groups of people, and we've developed a little bit of a segmentation, and I'll take you guys through that, but there's kind of 4 types of people in how they're reacting to COVID. And before I share how they're different, I'll share how they're similar, which is everyone's experience with COVID has been very similar. When you ask people, how has this impacted you? They talk about feeling inconvenienced, feeling rattled, just no longer feeling safe, no longer feeling secure. There's tons of pain around all the areas you would expect: work, distance learning, childcare, uncertainty about the economy, limiting activities, like all of those things everybody shares. The scarcity, the inability to get kind of basic necessities there for a while, rattled people to a degree I don't know if I can even communicate. When you ask people, like, what were the worst parts of this, they'll say, like, all of these things, work is up in the air and I felt vulnerable and all of these things, but I also couldn't get toilet paper, and that totally changed the way I think about how I am in this world. This kind of lack of preparedness that people recognized, and this potential scarcity, is not something we have faced as a society before.
Do they talk about how that will impact their outlook going forward?
They talk about, I think in the short term, we've heard tons about it's fewer shopping trips, bigger basket sizes, right? They're back to going to the stores. It seemed like everyone was going to shop online. I think when we talked a month ago, everyone was telling me, I'm never going to go back into another store. I only shop online now. That's all over. Everyone's going back to the stores. But they're going less frequently, and they're buying more stuff when they're there, and they're stocking up. That, like, I'm going to have 1,000 rolls of toilet paper in my cupboard, it's not going away. This stock up mentality is here to stay. And I think, that's something like has happened in the Depression era, where people like realized that scarcity was a possibility, and it changed the way they shop. So I think helping consumers be prepared, helping them stock up, is a huge opportunity, because suddenly that's the way they want to shop. So that's been really interesting. Wow. In terms of what people miss, it has been consistently human connection. People miss seeing their friends. They miss being with other people. They miss going to church. They miss other people. They don't miss stuff. They miss other people. And then what's maybe the most I think is maybe the most fascinating thing that we learned is that people see so much positivity in COVID. We hear every single person talks about this additional time with family, this chance to recalibrate, this chance to slow down and reevaluate life, and what were we spending so much time on, and why were we so busy? Why were we spending so much money? We've had a perfectly lovely time not spending all this money. Like, everyone has had this pause and they've really welcomed it. And I think it's going to change the way people spend their time, because suddenly they've realized, like, shit, spending time with my family feels novel and amazing. And why wasn't I doing that before? And I'm not going to go back to not doing that.
Yeah. So what behaviors under that, whether it's spending time with family or I don't know what it would be. What would you imagine is going to stick most post this pandemic?
I mean, I think it's going to be different types of personal interests, right? The gardening, the cooking, the hobbying, those things are going to continue. People have realized that when you make time to do those things, they bring a lot of joy and satisfaction. Those things are going to continue. I think the number of activities kids are involved in is going to decrease. I think people are going to start to prioritize. And it's not going to be about let's shelve them in 15 activities. It's going to be let's pick and choose a few, but save some time for the family. I think it's going to be, I have a huge impact on work, right? Suddenly there's all of this, like, even though I still worked, I worked from home, and that changed the construct and it changed the amount of time. People aren't going to go back. No one's going to go back to, like, let's commute for an hour and a half to work while my kids are in childcare, and I'll pick them up at 7 and put them to bed at 8:30. Like, I think that all of those things are changing. So again, this positivity, like, when you ask people how the experience has been, without exception, they'll say there's been a lot of good to it. No matter how badly they've been impacted, they'll talk about that there's been a lot of good.
Wow. Fascinating. Do you want to talk about the differences here, or should I? Because I want to talk a little bit about what you're hearing, similar sentiments on reopening in the states that have reopened. Maybe what you're hearing across those 4 segments in terms of the similar feelings towards reopening, if there is indeed a thing that is similar.
So there's 4 segments, and they kind of exist on a continuum of, we'll return to things very slowly we'll return to things to very quickly if they haven't already. So the first group is sort of affluent, highly educated. If you're in San Francisco, there's a lot of these people here. These are the people that are listening to science, that hunkered down because they felt like it was the right thing to do, but also because they could, right? We have this whole group of people that were able to work from home seamlessly. Their kids already had devices. They could put them on distance learning. They went to schools that provided a good distance learning plan. They had the means to have everything delivered. They didn't have to go out, so they stayed in. These are also the people that are going to be slowest to go back to normal, because they're making huge changes in their life as a result of this. These are the people that are selling their houses in San Francisco and moving to Lake Tahoe and moving to Marin and moving to, we're watching real estate prices in all of these places peak because people are bailing out of the city. I heard this about this group of people that are taking their kids out of private school in San Francisco and moving to Bolinas and funding the school there so that they can, big changes in their lives. It is all privilege based, right? They are making changes that probably everyone would if they could, but not everyone can. Right. It's a pretty small group. It's very easy, if you're in or around this group, to believe that that's what everyone is doing. I hear people in San Francisco say, everyone wears masks all the time and nobody is having play dates. Well, I'm here to tell you that everyone is this big.
Wow.
The next group is big. These are the normals, the middle Americans, the kind of everyman, the masses. This group does what they're told. They may or may not really believe that COVID is a threat, but they were told to stay inside and they did. They were told that they couldn't send their kids to school. Obviously, they didn't. They just sort of follow the rules. This group says over and over again, I cannot wait for things to go back to normal. I just want to get back to normal. As soon as you tell me things can go back to normal, I will go back to normal. So there's some pent up demand there. They're kind of following along. They're not unwilling to do what they have to do, though fatigue is definitely setting in for all of us. You know, they're getting antsy. They're kind of, you know, in terms of reentry, again, they'll go when they can, right? They're still shopping the big box stores. They have the whole time. They're going to be slower to restaurants and to plane travel because they've been told that's scary and that's risky. So, but they'll go back. They'll go back to kind of doing everything relatively normal again, except for this like work-life balance. That's going to, you know, they're going to adjust to that. They have adjusted that. I would say that that is most people, that they just do what they're supposed to do. And
they're looking for guidance, it sounds like. They're looking
so
for
much.
the authoritarian, do this. Yeah.
Yep. They're following, they are rule followers. And while they're anxious to get back to kind of normal life, they're not going to cut and run and do something that they're not supposed to do. So then quickly to get through our other two groups. So the third group is our, you know, most vulnerable high risk population. These are essential workers. This group is, I mean, it's a heartbreaking group, if I'm honest. They feel like they are not given. This one guy just did such a beautiful job of explaining it to me. He said, like, what are you talking about? Like, the whole world has been told that they have to stay inside to manage their health, but I have to go and leave my house and make myself vulnerable and my family vulnerable to earn $15 an hour at the grocery store so that everybody else can stay healthy. Like, how am I supposed to feel about that? And there's no sheltering in place because they have to go out, and there's no going back to normal because they never really stopped normal. Like, they might work fewer hours, but delivery services, you know, nurses, all of those kinds of people are definitely, like, you can see it and feel it, where there's this frustration of like everybody else kind of gets to, you know, I had one woman say, oh, all these people saying they have to stay at home. Like, you get to stay at home. I have to go to work. They're angry. They feel disenfranchised. They're so scared of getting sick and getting their family sick. There's a lot of fear in that group. You know, they are the group that should be being taken care of and they aren't. And, you know, we haven't quantified this group, but there's a lot of people out there like that. And depending on, you know, if you're a brand and this is your customer, they need a lot of being taken care of. And then there's the, you know, they're anti guys. We've seen them all on TV and they are out there. They think the whole thing is bullshit. They aren't going to be told to wear a mask. They aren't going to, you know, they don't believe in it. It's stupid. They think we're all followers for, you know, staying inside and wearing masks and all of these things. You know, they are very kind of anti being told what to do. Fascinatingly, they aren't going to restaurants either. They aren't traveling by plane either. A lot of it is lip service.
And all political?
It's very political. You know, they won't admit to being scared, but they're not doing those things, right? Like, we're not seeing planes full of these people. Right. I do think it's a relatively small segment, but they're definitely out there.
Fascinating. So other than the first group, the affluent privileged group, how would you say the other groups stratify across geos and income?
You know, I think obviously the affluent educated are mostly coastal. They're exactly where you would expect them to be. That biggest group, like, I mean, they're kind of spread all over again. They're most people, as are the high risk. Like, it really is, the reaction is divided in so many ways, right? Gender, religion, politics, geography, age, like, there's lots of ways to look at them. But I would say that, like, those normal and that very high risk vulnerable group, like, they're kind of all over the place because it is more kind of a mindset than it is dictated by geography. And then obviously, you know, the kind of anti tend to be very conservative and in traditionally conservative places.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating. Yeah. So as you're talking to these folks, what behaviors are they saying will return post-COVID? So again, in VC world and even working with some of the portfolio companies, the question comes up, what behaviors or routines that have been created over the last 4 months will stick when we go back to normal? What are
It's a great question.
What are you hearing from folks?
I mean, we're hearing none. I don't think that's true, but that's what people say. They are thinking of it as a point in time, a blip, a pause before things go back to normal. And people think about, like, I will make changes to my personal life, but in terms of, like, you know, I'm never going to shop in store again, like dramatic changes like that, we're not really hearing. And we really explored this whole idea of, right, it should be a habit now. Like, we've all gotten so used to staying at home and habits are formed in such a short time, but there really isn't the benefit of like a lot of these sort of newly formed behaviors. Let me rephrase. I think the things that will stick are the things where there was a benefit, and a habit is formed not just when something is repeated, but when there is a reward or a benefit at the end of it, right? Like, you eat healthy for 2 weeks, you lose 5 pounds, like, okay, I'm seeing some results. You sit at home, you're frustrated, you're aggravated, you can't work, your kids are home, like things aren't going well, like there's no reward, you're going to go back to kind of normal life. So I think in those ways that they're seeing benefit, again, the cooking, the gardening, the hobbies, the time with family,
Right.
the spending less money, those things I think are going to carry forward.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think home entertainment, I think we're going to see a lot less theater going, a lot less, you know, external entertainment, because people have realized, like, I can stay home and watch Netflix and it's virtually free and it's just as good. So I think things like that, again, where it's where there's a tangible benefit, that we'll see stick.
Fascinating. How many folks did you talk to across those 4 segments in your commission study?
We only did kind of a handful of each. So, you know, single digits of each.
Yeah.
And I think we would have to, if we really wanted to, we were talking to a brand, one of the first things, right, is you're going to figure out who your target is and where they fall on that spectrum, and then kind of dig deeper.
Are you going to publish those results? They would be fascinating to see. No?
Probably not, because it's pretty small. But I mean, we'll share them this way, but it's all really thought starters.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to drill down a bit into specific industries. And one you said you've been particularly focused on, or at least hearing a lot about, is the future of work and how work is going to change. Work obviously impacts all of us. And some of our portfolio companies are very focused on the future of work and how that's evolving. But even pre-COVID, work was changing. You know, people were working remotely. There was a lot of independent work and gig work. I'm just so curious what you found. Is the pandemic going to change or accelerate those trends? I would imagine so, but I would love to hear what you're hearing firsthand.
I mean, I do think that work is probably going to be the most impacted category out of all of this. I think the question that we keep being asked is, how are people going to shop differently? And my answer is, you should think about how people are going to work differently, because people's shopping habits are going to change a little. People's work habits are changing dramatically. Everyone we talk to talks about how work has changed and how they're not willing to go back to what it was before. So I think what the changes really accelerated was this idea that you can work from home, you can be productive, and there's a lot of there's a lot of upside to working from home. There's also a lot of downside, right? So you're not commuting, you're saving money and you're saving time, but it's hard to stay focused. You lose that human connection. You're not collaborating in the same way. You know, there's so much to be figured out. And I think where the light bulb went on for me is when I started hearing people say what companies needed to do for them. It stopped being like, oh, I have to work from home and I'm trying to figure out how to focus. It had to be, my employer needs to help support me working from home. They should provide stipends for furniture. They should provide mental health options so that people that are feeling too isolated can have support. They should figure out ways for us to collaborate. They should figure that out for us. I shouldn't be sitting at home trying to figure out how to collaborate. I want them to do that for me. I talked to a woman yesterday who just got her master's. So she's leaving her current job and she's evaluating new jobs. And she listed the things that companies needed to do to facilitate her working from home off the top of her head. And it was like 10 things long. They need to allow me to work from home. They need to provide me a stipend. They need to provide regular, I can't even remember all of the things. I could dig it up, but it was just all of these things that companies should do to make working from home successful for people. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of, right now this weird thing is happening where companies are reopening and offering their employees the opportunity to come back. And they're really being kind of scoffed at because people are like, well, one, my kids are still at home, so how am I going to go to work? But two, you haven't told me what you're going to do to make it safe. And if I have to go sit in my office with the door closed, why would I do that? How is that any better? Like, what's the upside of that? So they're really looking for businesses to offer them a new way of working. It has not been created. Some companies are doing better than others. Everyone is figuring it out, but I think it's a huge opportunity for brands to figure out how they are going to support workers in this kind of new construct and what that new construct is, because everyone's looking for that.
Right.
And it's this go ahead.
It's so fascinating. And it goes back to your segmentation of the masses where really all they're looking for is direction. They're looking for this authoritative figure to say, this is what we're doing, to give them comfort to do something. So it seems like you're seeing it more generally, but specifically with work, they're looking for their employer not only to give the benefits, but to give the direction about what's next.
Yeah, figure this out for me.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, when you go to work in a new office, that's all there for you, right? The desk is there, the computer's there, the manual is there, the training is in place, the snacks are in the kitchen. So I think for a lot of people, they're looking for that. Like, set this up for me at my house so that I can be productive. Like, I can't figure that out.
Right. Are you hearing people say, other than I don't want to go to an office and sit behind a closed door because that's not productive. Are you hearing folks saying, listen, I'm not returning to work. I don't care what my employer says. Like, are they being that direct and forthright in their own decision-making around what work will look like?
We're hearing a lot of that. And we're hearing a lot of like this sort of, if they ask me to come back to the status quo, I'm not going to do that. I've tasted working from home and seen the benefits, and there's no reason for me to go back to the status quo. So it's not so much I'm not going to go back, it's I'm not going to go back to the status quo. I'm not going to go back to the way it was before.
Right.
But again, like, the expectation is that the onus is on the company to figure it out and not the individual.
Mm-hmm. And you talked a little bit before we had connected a few weeks ago, you talked a little bit before about, given government payments, folks grappling with the decision of what a return to work would look like, and does it even make sense? Are you still hearing that?
We're not hearing so much. I mean, so many people are unemployed, right? So there's really two buckets. They're the people that have jobs and are working from home. And they're kind of looking for support and not planning to go back to the office full time, and are looking for this, support and adjustment to a new way of working. The unemployed people are trying to figure out what they're going to do. Does it make sense to find a new job if I'm going to be stuck home with kids? I know one of your questions was childcare. I'm going to tell you the same thing. No one is figuring out childcare. Everyone is waiting for childcare to be figured out. Tell me when I can bring my kids back. Tell me when I can send my kids back to school. Tell me when I can send my kids to daycare. What are the parameters? As soon as I hear those, then I'll know what I can do. But until someone tells me what's available, I'm home with my kids.
Wow. Yeah. So sticking on the unemployed for a bit, have you heard folks say, never going back to W-2, freelancing is the route I'm going to go because I need that flexibility given my kids are at home? Anything?
Not as much, but I think that's a point in time. I think that will come, right? I think once things settle down, there's a vaccine, we have a little bit more certainty, then I think people will start to figure out a non-traditional way of working that makes sense. I think right now, nobody's really looking for a job because it doesn't feel like there's a job out there. And there's just this we're in crisis, kids are home, I'm just going to hold until things settle down a little bit. So I don't think that's happening now, but I think it will happen.
Okay. Okay, I want to transition. If anybody has questions on work, feel free to ping me just via chat and I can ask Samantha. But just going to transition over to food and grocery. Restaurants have been the hardest hit area with COVID. At least in the early days, and it sounds like things are changing a bit. Consumer behavior had to change to, I'm just going to use a grocery delivery. I'm not stepping foot in a grocery store. I'm so curious to hear that has started to change. So let's talk a little bit about what you're hearing there, and particularly as it relates to this idea of scarcity and how shocked people and how rattled they were by that feeling and how it has impacted people's grocery shopping and that behavior.
So much to unpeel here. The first thing is that there was a very clear kind of pendulum swing, right? We went into shelter in place, everybody bought online, had food delivered or did curbside pickup, didn't go into stores. And then all of the delivery services let people down. It didn't work. So this was fascinating. People thought, okay, I'm just going to buy online. Well, you couldn't get a delivery window. We probably all experienced that. So, well, your only option was to have food delivered, but suddenly you couldn't get it delivered. Or the substitutions, and again, the scarcity meant your grocery order wasn't what you wanted it to be. And people take that stuff really seriously. Like, you're already stuck home, tensions are running so high, and then you show up with a bunch of stuff that I didn't want. And it just felt totally unsuccessful. People didn't feel like they were in charge of what they were spending. They weren't clear on how much it was going to be. The cost wasn't what they were used to it being when they were doing it on their own. And it just didn't take that long before they said, it's just easier for me to do it on my own. Often, again, in the beginning, when that pendulum started to swing back and they said, I'm just going to go to the store by myself, they would pick one person in the household. So mom would go, dad would stay home with the kids, and then mom was the only one that went shopping. But suddenly, right, she's in control again. She can pick up what she needs. If it's not there, she can go somewhere else to find it. She's not dealing with delivery windows. There's no disappointment. So that'll happen pretty quickly. And I just keep thinking, like, so many brands just blew it. And of course, how could anybody have been prepared for this? But there was such a huge opportunity to convert thousands of shoppers to delivery customers, and it didn't happen.
Wow.
Because it didn't work.
Wow.
So people are back to shopping. And remember that Walmart and Target and grocery stores didn't close. So suddenly those brands are the saviors. That is going to, and this is, I'm moving on to another topic, but I'll touch on it now. Like that's what's going to crush small businesses, right? Like, all the small businesses had to close, but Target was still there and Walmart was still there and everybody could still go to them. And suddenly those are the brands that supported everybody through this pandemic.
Do you think that affinity and brand loyalty will continue?
I really do think that will continue. That, through no doing of their own, they got to stay open, and therefore they got to be the hero. And everybody's gotten used to getting, they were already going there primarily, but suddenly all the little shops, they're just sort of forgotten, and no one talks about missing small businesses other than hair salons.
Wow.
Yeah. They talk about, when you say, like, what brands have supported you, they say Amazon, Target, Walmart.
And I will continue to use those posts.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah. And maybe they've tried, the pickup, curbside pickup or delivery, or, some of those other channel options from those stores, but they haven't really gone outside of that kind of core big box offering.
Right. Fascinating. So staying on this topic of just purchasing behavior, what do you think will happen in terms of people buying higher quality items? And this is a question coming in from Tori, but people buying higher quality, fewer items versus buying en masse, maybe cheaper items. Have you heard from customers what their purchasing behavior will look like as it relates to quality?
It's such a good question. And we've heard a whole spectrum. We've heard people saying, well, I'm eating at home and I'm cooking more, so I'm buying better ingredients and I'm buying organic and I'm really focusing on food and I'm buying better quality stuff. And then we've heard, I'm buying lower, like, I've stopped buying organic because I want to save money and I'm just buying more. So everyone is buying more. Again, bigger basket size, fewer shopping trips, tons of stockpiling. Like no one's ever going to run out of rice again. But
Just did actually this week. Nice.
now it's going to change your life. It's amazing to think how that impacts. So I would say that has varied. It has changed what people buy, but in different ways. And I think a lot of that is dependent on kind of your personal financial situation and what your work situation is. Certainly organics are one of the first things to go if you're having trouble financially. And we definitely heard that.
Makes sense.
But yeah.
Okay, I want to switch gears. I'm going to pause and give folks just a second to chat because I'm going to switch gears, guys. If you have any questions on just what we're hearing from research, feel free to ping me via chat because I want to transition a bit into understanding how brands could think about structuring their own market research projects in this time because, as you told me a couple of weeks ago, research has changed dramatically given there's no in-person conversations that are being had anymore. But I'm going to pause because I want to make sure I get any questions on the topics we just discussed. Okay. One is anything specifically about how people view healthcare, particularly non-essential healthcare. Thanks, Karina. Good question.
It is a great question. You know, healthcare is another one of those things, and I feel like a broken record. Like, people do what they're told in healthcare. So people aren't saying, I want virtual visits with my doctor. They're saying, I can only do a virtual visit with my doctor. Or, you know, no one's saying like, I want to put my treatment on hold until this is over. They're saying, I have to put my treatment on hold. So people feel very disempowered around healthcare. They're kind of being told what to do and reacting to it. They don't love it. It feels really uncomfortable and frustrating. And so, but it really isn't something that people feel like at all empowered to impact. They're really like, you know, this is what I'm being told and this is what's happening. And, you know, I had this one woman who's like, I finally got to get my surgery that was on hold for 3 months. You know, I just sat around and waited until the doctors told me I could do it. And if you think about it, like, if she didn't have another option, what's she going to do? But there's a lot of frustration around that, and a lot of confusion around that area, but not a place that they feel empowered to make change at all.
Do you think that will drive people to press healthcare companies to take different models or new approaches? What are they looking for in the next iteration of healthcare companies?
I mean, I don't think they know. You know, I think there's a lot of complaints and no solution. I think it is up to healthcare companies to come up with a better way of doing things or to prevent, and this is a, you know, a rule of research, right? You can't ask your customers to tell you what they need. You have to give them ideas and let them react to them. Right. You know, if they could do it, somebody would just do it. Right. But healthcare in particular is such an area where people just feel so disempowered and frustrated all the time at what it is, but have no idea how to make it better.
Okay, that's a good segue. Chris, go ahead.
Can you comment a little bit, not just on healthcare, but health and wellness in general? Because you've seen a shift of, you know, Peloton stock is at an all-time high. People couldn't buy weights online at Amazon. ClassPass. What does that mean for ClassPass? What does that mean for yoga studios? What does that mean for, you know, people maybe thinking more about preventative health and investing in their health? They're eating better. They may be buying organic. Kind of depends on where you are and socioeconomically. But how do you see wellness changing, not just healthcare?
You know, it's a good question. We're definitely seeing changes in the way people eat. People are eating at home more. They're recognizing that that's healthier. They're putting more time and effort into food. That has a very notable reaction. Certainly the Peloton, the working out online, all of those things are that kind of higher end group that I talked about. Everybody else is feeling a bit out of shape and less healthy because they've been stuck inside. But I do think that people are more conscious of wellness overall. And again, thinking about food, thinking about lifestyle, thinking about, you know, balance and work-life balance and those kinds of things. I think those things are starting to impact wellness. I think the exercise piece of it is really in limbo right now because of what, you know, you can and can't do. I think it'd be interesting to see how that all comes out in the wash, but I don't think we know what that's going to look like yet. But I do think people are thinking, and have been even before this, more about kind of holistic wellness. We're definitely seeing that coming through.
And then maybe just a quick comment on mental health and how that's related, in that I would guess that most people on this haven't taken a vacation in 4 months. Like nobody's really allowing themselves breaks. So you kind of feel always on and always doing everything marginally well. And I think it's creating there's still sort of sustained anxiety. There's a lot of uncertainty about the future, and you have a shortage of mental health professionals. So how do you think that evolves or changes, or what are you hearing?
I mean, the impact on mental health was visible, and it was fascinating because you could see people just struggling with, again, wearing all the different hats and feeling, out of control and overwhelmed and all of those things, really seeing that. And truthfully, then the whole Black Lives Matter uprising happened, and the impact on mental health was huge. Like, you watched people, one day we were talking to people and everyone was kind of melancholy and like talking about how they just felt a little like they were going stir crazy. And then all of that happened and people were angry, visibly depressed, crying. Like that, I think the impact on mental health in all that we have gone through is huge. We have heard nothing about people reaching out for help. That's not to say they aren't, but they aren't talking about it. We've heard a lot about that being shelved. I'm not seeing my therapist. I'm not talking to my therapist. I'm not doing the things that I used to do for wellness. I used to go for walks. I used to see my friends. That was my, like, all of this, like, that was my kind of safe space, or that was my peace of mind, has been shelved. I think people are hungering for ways to find that back. But I think at the moment that's all kind of on hold, and it's reaching crisis levels. People are having a hard time.
And is there a difference there, Samantha, between younger folks and older folks that you're hearing and how they're coping with this?
I mean, certainly, it's interesting. People that worked from home already and stay-at-home moms with young kids are least affected. They just, they were already there. This has certainly had an impact, but a less of an impact. Single people have been noticeably impacted. They're having a really hard time, lonely, sad, scared, could you imagine? So a lot of that. And then, moms, I think, parents with kids in the school age are struggling. Everyone's struggling. But again, I think the people where we've seen the biggest impact are the single people. And again, the kind of post Black Lives Matter uprising, everybody was really impacted by that. And I think that was, I think it was just things were already so hard, and then all of that happened. And then it was just, too much for all of us.
Yeah. Okay, before we leave this topic, one closing question on, particularly for those brands who were the heroes, have they modeled anything that other brands can consider on how to engender trust with their users or their customers?
A great question. I will say that what the brands that are getting applause for being heroes have just done something, right? They have adhered to safety precautions in a very visible way. They have donated to an organization or started a program in a very visible way. They've done something. The people that are doing nothing are noticed. Like, people are expecting a lot of brands right now, but they don't really know what they need from them. They just want brands to be doing something. And I would say adherence to safety protocols is the lowest hanging fruit. They're watching you. They want to know what you're doing. They want to know that you're keeping them safe. They want to know that you're keeping your workers safe. They want to know. They don't want an email that says, we're in this together. We care about you. They want to see some sort of visible action. So I would say that, like, that's the blueprint, is take action, do something. I will say this, and I feel like I've been saying this every day for days. This is the time for companies to innovate, to pivot, to change, to make a splash, because everybody's watching, right? Your customers are looking at you like, what are you going to do? The world is kind of a new place. Like, there's so much opportunity to innovate. There's so much, I think, openness to customers right now. Like, they're looking for change. I think the worst thing a brand can do is just kind of continue as they were. I think it's a time for innovation, for change, for trying new things, for making a big splash, for saying something, standing for something. Like, all those things a good brand should always do. The need is at 11 right now.
Right. Makes sense. Okay, we're going to transition over to how to structure a research project. So I'm just really curious on how brands should think about structuring brand research or any type product research in this new age. Can't talk to customers face to face, obviously, can't do any group studies or focus groups. So I'm curious how they should think about structuring research in this age.
You know, it's a good question. I would say a couple of things. One, it's a really critical time to do research because I think no one really knows who their customer is right now, right? Like if you think about it, like I had to call my best friend to figure out how she was feeling about all this. Where was she? What was she going? What was going through? Like I think that's the same as true of everybody's customers. Like we don't really know where our customers are until we talk to them, right? Like everything is new. So one, do talk to your customers right now. It's a great time to do research. People are available. People are super open books. They will tell you anything. You know, everybody's pretty vulnerable. Like I said earlier, that kind of those walls have come down. So it's a good time. I keep joking that like, you know, show rates are at an all-time high. I have never had so few people flake on me because everyone's around. And a little extra cash goes a long way. So lots of reasons that it's a good time to do research. And I would say that the rules for, you know, the way to do research right now, so tactically has to be online. I would say that they're kind of early on, I have a historical hatred of online focus groups. I think they're really hard to manage, and it's hard to get good feedback. I've come around a bit in that it is a great way to get some energy around a concept, a vibe around a concept, some confirmation. So it's nice to do one-on-one interviews in tandem with some sort of group conversation. That's a nice way of doing research because you just get a couple of different perspectives. I think asking people to submit things to you. So we often will send just a super open-ended question out to all of our customers beforehand and say, answer this question and send it to us before we talk to you in person. So everybody's kind of prepared. They've committed to some opinions. So you want to come at it a few different ways, tactically. But again, you're super limited. Like you are talking to customers online right now. That is your only option, which is fine. Mm-hmm. You know, again, like we've all had to adjust as we've adjusted, becoming comfortable with that being the platform for research. The world has adjusted to getting a hell of a lot better at talking online, right? It used to be people were so uncomfortable having a video chat, and unless they were in a corporate environment where they had them regularly, they would be awkward. They didn't know how to use technology. They didn't want to see themselves. They didn't want to share. Like that's all over, right? Zoom changed everything for us. Everybody's pretty good. So it's totally doable. I would say to do it well, there are two absolutely critical rules. This is true always, COVID or not. You have to know who you want to talk to. So you figure out who the customer is and make that as narrow a group as possible. So don't try to talk to everyone because you want to get an understanding of what your most important group of customers thinks, and then know what you want from them. So this, like, how are people reacting to COVID, or, you know, what's changed? Like those are just too general a question for a consumer to answer. The way to get good feedback is to develop hypotheses and come up with concepts for them to react to. So, right, I've just given you this call to action. Every company should be innovating. You should take all of your ideas for innovation and you should put them in front of customers and say, what do you think about this idea? Even if you never do it, give them something to react to, because then they'll tell you not just what they think of it, but why. And then you get at all of the underlying, you know, what's changed about them, why this does or doesn't appeal to them. But if you just say what's changed, they'll say like, you know, I don't know, that's too broad a question to answer. So you want to just make it really, really focused and really, really tight so that you know who you're talking to and you know what you want to know about them, and then you just go after that.
Yes. So we have a lot of young companies on the call. If their user bases are small, how do you leverage them talking to enough people, but not talking to the same people repeatedly, and badgering them with requests for interviews?
Right. I mean, if you want to talk to users specifically, you're limited, right? If you have a small user base, you have to be careful about, right? You don't want to reach out to them. You don't want them to become professional respondents. So that can be tricky, but you can also look at a group of users and then a like group of non-users, and you can get a ton of people who are just like your users, but not yet using your brand. Yes. And you can learn a ton from them. So you don't have to stick to only people that use your brand. And there's lots of ways to do it.
Is that mostly demographic profile that you try to match there?
Yeah, it should be demographic and psychographic. Of course, it depends on the brand, but like if you can tell us who your user is, we can tell you who the correlating non-user is. And again, you just want to define them pretty narrowly.
Okay, so once you collect the research, what's your biggest recommendation to brands on how you implement it or how you act on it?
You know, I think that the best way to do it is to plan, and you were always really good at this when we worked together, is you have to plan to use the research before you get the research, right? You have to, your research plan has to be, we are going to talk to these people and learn this thing. And when we learn this thing, this is what we're going to do with those insights. We're going to decide this, we're going to plan this, we're going to choose this, we're going to move forward with this or not move forward with this. That plan already has to be in place. And then so that when those implications come in, those are just one step in the process and those aren't the end. I see so often I'll come in and present implications and everyone will go, thanks, bye. And I always want to say, no. Like you have to now start talking about, this is what we heard. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And I like to make that part of the final, the presentation of, I'll tell you what we think, and then we're going to workshop those ideas so that you all have action steps coming out of them, because otherwise it just ends up being like interesting information. So I think really crafting and building in that kind of action into the process is really important.
Yeah, defining that up front is so
yeah, clear. Exactly. So again, like the presentation of insights should not be the end.
Totally. So one specific question around conducting a survey of customer preferences, any recommendations on how to integrate that into a product strategy or product build?
It really depends on the specifics, but I think it's always a good idea to incorporate, like, I think you want to come up with your hypotheses. In an ideal world, you'll come up with your hypotheses either independently or using qual, then test them so you know what's real, and then build that into the product build, right? So you know that you're making the right changes, adjustments, builds, whatever it is.
Right. So do you usually use survey or quant to validate qual?
We do probably about 50-50. We'll either do the qual and use the quant to validate it, or somebody will hand us quant. This happens a lot where a firm will say, we did a survey, we need to know why these things are true. And so then we'll do the qual on the back end to answer why those things. And it works, it really is project dependent which way works better. I could argue either. We've used both really successfully. Often quant is internal. It's a great way to keep it efficient if the brand does the quant themselves, particularly if it's user-based, and then hands us the results, and we can kind of blow that out into a story by talking to people. Just an efficient way to do it, kind of managing resources and things.
Okay, I could keep asking questions upon questions, but I'm going to ask one last one and give people a heads up that if they have any questions to chat me. But I'm curious if you, given we're in a time of upheaval that impacts everybody, brands alike, have you worked with a brand where the research has suggested that a pivot is massively needed? And then what do you suggest a brand does? Or what are the inputs to make that decision?
We have heard, again, we've been working with these brands that are doing great and have pivoted and are doing great. We have heard a lot of about brands that need a massive pivot and that are potentially going to fail if they don't make some huge changes, but they weren't the brands that we worked for. Again, I will say that with the Black Lives Matter moment, like we've heard a lot about brands that are going to fail miserably if they don't start addressing equality in a very overt way. I think a lot of brands are going to get hit for that. And people know. Like I'm shocked at how much people know what brands are and aren't doing, and what's considered a meaningful change and what's considered lip service. So
yeah,
I don't know if that answers your question, but
yeah, no, there's eyeball. I mean, I think brands probably underestimate how closely consumers are paying attention, particularly in times like this. So that's one.
Yeah, they really are. And again, like it's inaction that's offensive to consumers right now. Like brands that are kind of continuing on like everything's fine are really being cast in a poor light, and people are like, you know, what are you doing? Like the world is changing. Why aren't you?
Yes. Yep. Well, this has been awesome. I'll give we have a question. Do you anticipate that in the wake of Black Lives Matter and COVID, we will see more consumers voting with their dollars than ever before?
I think so. Certainly what we're hearing is that people are being more thoughtful about the brands that they're supporting based on those brands' behaviors. I expect that will continue. I mean, we've never seen anything like this kind of back-to-back
upheaval.
I don't even know, right? Upheaval craziness. So I think so. Yeah.
And just based on what we talked about with the big box guys, it sounds like there's a narrowing of preferences when it comes to brands. So I would imagine that both of these incidents and trends will make consumers even more focused on where they purchase.
Right. Yeah, I definitely think so. I think so. And, you know, we're all looking for ways to feel better, right? We all want to feel like things are moving in a more positive direction, and brands that are helping us where we want to support.
Yeah. And in control. And if we can, can purchase from a brand that we actually support, that's showing some level of control in a world where we have zero. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Yep. Any other questions?
Are there any sources that the folks can read to keep up to date on these things, other than the research that you conducted yourself? Were you turning to anything to get third-party information on how consumer behaviors are changing?
I mean, there's so much stuff out there, and truthfully, I don't give much of it, you know, any more than our own research. I feel like it's all so in flux right now. You know, we've found it very helpful to read just the mainstream media about what's happening in different regions before we talk to people. So before I talk to someone in Texas, I try to figure out what the hell is happening in Texas, because it's hard to ask them because people don't necessarily know or can't articulate in a very comprehensive way all that's going on. But I wouldn't say I've seen any sources yet. I think they're coming. I think there'll be some fascinating, you know, white papers and things coming up. But I think right now we're just in it. And while it feels like we've been in it forever, it's just not been that long. And I think we've got a long way to go.
Yep. Yep. All right. This was so awesome. We're at time. Thank you, Samantha. This was incredibly helpful.
Thank you
so much. I am going to do the summary and share the full video with folks early in next week. So folks on the phone, feel free to share that with your teams, because I think this is invaluable information as we sort through it. As Samantha said, we're still in the middle of it. So who knows, but I think this is our best indication of what will happen post, because you're getting it from actual people who are experiencing it. So incredibly helpful. I thank you for your time. Go enjoy Tahoe, which is apparently going gangbusters. Nobody go to Tahoe, but everything.
Don't. Everyone's already here. Do everybody feel free, if you want to chat about research, how to structure research, please consider me a resource. I'm always happy to jump on a call. As you might have gathered, I could talk about this stuff all day. So please think of me as a resource and a partner. I'm always happy to help.
And Samantha, if you're okay, I'll share your email and contact information in my email next week. Okay, great.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for having me.
All right, thanks, everybody. Have a good one.